day 4 of the 6 Day War. In day 3 of the 6 Day War, Klal Yisrael was zeicha to conquer the old city of Yerushalayim, and the whole way it was conquered was mamash b'derech nes. It was never even in the plans. The Israeli government did not have a havim in it. Did not have a
You
havim.
got the wrong day. June.
I'm talking about the Hebrew date.
Oh, the Hebrew date. Okay.
The Israeli government did not have a havim in of taking over the old city of Yerushalayim. But what happened was since Jordan attacked and they were really fighting a defensive war, so they fought actually right in the neighborhoods. The border was right in the neighborhoods we were used to. The base of Yisrael was right on the border, right by the Mandelbaum Gate, and then further north, like by Mal Stafna, was right along the border. Mal Stafna is right where the bloodiest battle in the entire war was. That they had more casualties then than even in the Yom Kippur War, than the one single day in the Yom Kippur War, and that was when they fought on Ammunition Hill, which was the most entrenched position that the Jordanians had. But once they broke through all those places, and they had to because they were coming under terrible fire, it's literally like they're firing on the people east of Bathurst from west of Bathurst. They're literally shooting from block to block. So they had to go in, they had to take over, and they found themselves had completely surrounded Yerushalayim. And one of the reasons why they went is because there was a mistaken transmission by the Egyptian general who was commanding the Jordanian troops. And not knowing what he was saying, is they had really attacked a compound, a UN compound that was south of this old city of Yerushalayim called Government House. And by mistake, he said, we're going to be attacking Mount Scopus. So the Israelis were misinformed because of the misinformation that this general said, and they assumed it was a mistake. There's still no explanation why he said that. And they had to defend Mount Scopus because that was an isolated area that they had Eden there, and they had to defend it. So that forced them to go in and take over. And then the night before, they had realized that they had surrounded the city. Now, the city was heavily fortified. The Jordanians were shooting at the Eden from the city, from behind the ramparts, and it was very bad. They were getting blasted to bits. But they got around. They surrounded the city. Not unbeknownst to them, the Jordanians were terrified inside the city because they knew they were surrounded, and they assumed that they were going to be wiped out the next day. And they, middle of the night, surrendered. The entire Jordanian army that was stationed in the old city left under the cover of night and ran towards the east, ran over the border to be in Jordan. So when the Eden eventually decided to break through into the old city, there was zero resistance. There was not a single shot fired. They just walked right in, and they walked into Har Bayis. And then there's the famous statement of Har Bayis B'Yedenu by Moti Gur, who was the commander who did it. When I watch the video clips of that, I still cry. It's like it's unbelievable. After 19 years, we got the Kaisel back.
I got a book where Goran was begging them to blow up the Dome of the Rock.
Rabbi Goren, you mean the rabbi?
Begging them, blow it up, blow it up, blow it up.
They didn't want any artillery in the. They never shot any. Even though they were being shot upon, they never shot any artillery at the bullets. They shot, but not artillery at the old city. Today is also the yard site of Rav Meir Mishlan. He was a big Poyel Yeshuas, especially Binyani Prenosa. He was very big into the final class. So he usually went to bed at night without a penny left because he was always giving it out. So there's one story that I saw from the Tasher Rebbe brought down from him, is that there was a Yid from Yerushalayim. This is a very, very uncommon and unusual type of thing to occur, but it happened maybe once in a lifetime. The Yid from Yerushalayim who was having problems marrying off his children, he didn't have enough money. So someone suggested, why don't you go to Chutz La'aretz and raise money? It was like, this is like whoever heard of such a thing? And he said, no, I don't feel comfortable going and snoring. So
this is where it all started.
No, this is where it becomes unusual. He said, I don't feel comfortable going to America.
Oh, I thought he had to be the Nakshon.
They said, if at least so don't go snore, go at least to some big rebbes and ask them to at least try to daven for you. So he went, this Yid went a regular Yerushalmi. He went to Meir Prem Islam. I think he had like 3 or 4 children he had to marry off. And he was a regular schnorrer, so they didn't let him in. He had to wait there like everybody else in the waiting room. And then he decided, it was taking a long time, and it was already on the second day of waiting. And he decided, I'm going to go into the Besmedrash. I'll go to one of the Midrashim in the city, and I'll learn. I'll come back. Someone will hold my place. As soon as he left, the Rebbe came out and says, "Was there a Yid here from Eretz Yisrael?" And nobody knew. Just some schnorrer walked in, walked out. He said, "No, somebody's here from Yisrael. I need you to find him. I need you to find him." So he sent his Hasidim or his Gaboyim out from Besmerish to Besmerish till they find this guy. They brought him back. Said, "The Rebbe's looking for you." He brings him back in, and the Rebbe says, "I don't know if you know, but ever since your first child was born, I've been putting away a little bit of money every day in a pushka for you. And I have these 4 or 5 pushkas full of coins. That's your money I put away for you. You don't even know I am." So I don't know how the Rebbe knew to put away money for this. Was Birach HaKodesh, but he had put away money, and he gave this guy all the money he needed for all his sustenance. And ever since then, if you're a very person fed a cat, and ever since then.
Can you imagine the nace that the money in a pushka is enough to pay for a wedding?
It was some big pushkas. And in those days, coins were real metal.
Maybe or weddings were smaller.
Oh, could be. Okay, so that was it's Chusay Yogin Aleinu Al Klal Yisrael. He's a very big Rebbe. We should daven that he should be he should be the same family and Klal Yisrael should be Jewish to him. And of course, the Yeshua puts out about the Tfilas Hashla that's supposed to be said on Erev Rishon Simon for the Chinuch of our children. Okay, so let's see the Heilig Gemara. Zak Lal Hayy B'Mikdash. The Mishnah taught us that whenever someone was Mesach, he had to go to the mikveh, and whenever someone meraglayim, he had to do kiddush yadayim meraglayim. I understand why if someone is matal mayim, he has to wash his feet mishum nitzotzes, because if there's some spray on his feet, it should be wiped off. I understand that. Elo yadayim, my time. Just because his feet have spray on them, why would he have to wash his hands? Omar Rababa said, Zoy said there's, from here you see that mitzvah l'shap shape. It's a mitzvah to wipe off any extra spray from meraglayim. And Rashi tells us why. Mitzvah l'shap just biyodoi. So it's not just you have to wipe off, like shake your foot off. You have to use your hands to wipe it off, with your hand to wipe it off. Why is that? Because I guess with your hand, you could be sure that everything is completely wiped off. It's and it's no raglet. Why is that? We don't want someone to go out on the street and have meraglayim on his shoes, because then he's going to look. Normally, the spray sprays it far enough away that it won't drop on his shoes. However, if he by mistake dropped on the shoes, somebody might think that he has an injured aver, and it doesn't. There's no stream. It doesn't shoot far away. They just drip down. And what's the problem they'll think is that? Because a krushavka ain't a moil. A krushavka cannot give birth. He cannot be mazriya somebody. He cannot fertilize somebody, and therefore he can't have children. Yet we know he has children. So where do those children come from? People are going to say that his children are not his, and that's moitzi laz and his children. And for that reason, a person has to be careful. You see, Chazal make sure that people keep a clean reputation and keep their family reputation clean. So the shiloh over here is, that's one hand. You don't need 2 hands. This is biyadoi. So why does he have to kiddush yadayim at line? So vice the from here that 2 hands travel together. When you make kiddush yadayim reglaim, it's always 2 hands together. It's never 1 hand by itself. Okay, but notice the lashon haGemara is mitzvah l'shapshi. And then the Gemara brings a raya from Rabami. Messiah the Rabami, this will prove Rabami's point. Rabami osir la'odam sheyetze v'nitoytze shal gav raglav v'pnei shenira k'kushavcha u'moitzi laz albonav shemam zer. So it's interesting to note that we said mitzvah. Now Rav Ami is saying osir la'odam. There's a very big difference between the two. So the Yosy and my masber that if someone knows who's going outside, he's not allowed to go outside. So one may not go outside. That's an issur. But what if someone's not going outside? He's staying in his home. Then it's only a mitzvah l'shap shape. Why? Because maybe he'll go outside. So if someone's not planning to go outside, he should still be mishapshir. But if someone's going outside, there's a chiyuv to be mishapshir. Umbra Papa. Soya b'mkoima. Which would be interesting to note that technically, and that's what it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, technically, if someone is matla me'er glayim and there are no need tzitzis at all, he doesn't have to wash his hands. We, of course, wash our hands because of cleanliness, but technically, halachically, you don't have to wash your hands. The whole problem is because of the tzitzis. Omar Papa, soya b'mkoima. If soya is in its place, now I told you yesterday we're going to be learning about planets today. So the planet that we're learning about today is Uranus. That is the name of the planet. So Tsoya b'mkoima, the nekef pia tabas, also licorice Krishna. So if someone is not clean inside, it's also for him to say Krishna. And this is halacha l'maisa. The Shulchan Aruch paskins that people have to keep themselves very clean, because if someone's not clean, someone uses the washroom and he's not completely clean, you're actually not the kind the mitzvah Krishna. You actually have to say Krishna over. So if someone after davening goes and finds that it's not clean there, he has to say Krishna over. There's a shayla about tefillah, but Krishna for sure he would have to say over. Now, what in the world is that doing in this sugya? How did we get to astronomy from our Mishnah? So if we look into Haggai's Mamarashberg, he says Mishum dekatani mas nisan. Since the Mishnah said Kol hameisech raglav ton tefillah. Why do you have to toivel? People think the reason why you have to toivel is a mile of kedusha. No, the reason why someone has to toivel is the time of shema nishira tzoy al basari. The reason why you're supposed to go to the mikveh before davening, the deraisa, the genin, is to bathe yourself, to make sure your body is physically clean. Lahachi ma'ase hacha hachter papa. That's why the Gemara is bringing the halacha that Rav Papa says. Hagam de ikar b'kayim shayach l'perach mishamesu. Even though this really belongs in Hilchos Brachos, not in Hilchos Yom Kippur, but since we discussed going to the mikveh, because one must be completely clean, Gemara is going to elaborate a little bit on it.
And why does it have to be a mikvah? It could be anything. It could be a bath.
Well, a mikveh is a bath.
Oh, so it's not referring to an actual mikvah.
Oh,
Ritual bath.
I thought this was the makor for the guys who ignore the sign that says everybody must shower before entering the mikveh.
I think this is tucked away here in the little letter of Yuma, so that the next person should have an appetite to go into the mikveh. We don't know that this is the real reason why people are supposed to.
No, because in those days the mikveh was a spring, the mikveh was a river. They didn't have built mikvahs like we have in the Gemara's times. So the mikveh was a place where they bathed. We have now ritual baths, and that's why we insist that people shower before. But there should be a sign in the mikveh that if you learn the Gemara well, you'll know that the shower before the mikveh is just as important as the mikveh itself, if not more, because that avoids the deraisidic problems. Avad, it's beautiful to have that extra level of kedusha go to the mikveh, but the main purpose of the mikveh is to be physically clean. So take that shower. Eden. We're getting now into a very, very detailed analysis of the situation over here. We're using a telescope to see the planets carefully. Eden. If it's actually visible, the dirt, pshita, it's pashut that someone is not going to be yoytze in mitzvah krishma. I need the loyneris. If it's not visible, it's in a place where it's concealed, where the sun doesn't shine. Then loynit leTorah lemalachei asharis. The Torah wasn't given to malachei asharis. And this isn't just a slogan; it's very, very real. The halacha is you're not mechuyev to check with an X-ray machine or a microscope for bugs. Toiloyim you check with your eyes. Something that you cannot see with the naked eye, there's no problem of toiloyim on that. Or for instance, the place can say if someone in the Yisrael is eating walnuts and he has to take meiser from them, now you're not allowed to take meiser or trumas from something that's not good and something that's good. But sometimes you open up a nut, you don't know if it's going to be rotten inside. So are you mechuyev to crack open all the nuts before you take meiser? Are you mechuyev to put them through an X-ray machine? Avad not. And in another halacha more close to what we're discussing is, I think it's brought down from the Sefer Hasidim, that if people are going to try to be like Malachei Asharis, it's going to end up causing damage. For instance, someone must be clean when they daven. Someone must have a settled stomach when they daven. Or they were filmed. So what happens if someone is so uber concerned that he's going to avoid davening because of it, that's where it actually could work against them.
Or you have to pay triple the price for checked lettuce.
Oh, gotta buy pre-washed. But that's not what the Torah wants of us. So if it's ain't nearest, it wouldn't be a problem. So what's chiddush over here is what Papa telling us that also licorice krishma by Toiv and Koima mimanashich. It's obvious to us. What's the chiddush of our Papa? Zok to Gemara, lo tzricha de yoshiv v'niris, when he's crouched, when he's squatting, that's when it's visible. But oimed, if he's standing, it's not visible. And the chiddush of our Papa that even in such a situation, one may not say krishma. Why would it be any different halachically than if tzoya is found on someone's hand, for instance? If someone has dirt on his skin, or what happens if a person is standing outside the basic kisei, but he stuck his hand into the basic kisei? So he's out, his hand is inside. Amar Mutter licorice Krishma. If Huna says you're allowed to say Krishma, if Huna learns the pasuk kol on the shama to halal kol, as long as all your breathing areas are not in a dirty place, so as long as your nose and your mouth, which is where you take air in, is not in a dirty place, the fact that your hand is in a dirty place is not mafriya, and you're allowed to say Krishma. If Chista Amar, we learned from the pasuk Rashi says, kol atzmoisei tamanu. None of your bones, all of your bones are saying Krishma. So if you put a limb like a hand into an area that's a basic kisi that's dirty, once again, you would not be able to say Krishma. If Chistam also look at Krishma, you wouldn't be allowed to say Krishma if your hand was there. The Kachal or Rapapa mitervayu, and it's shver on Rapapa from both shitas. Because Rapapa is saying, even if it's not near us at all, even if it's concealed, it's going to be a problem. But Sai, according to Rafuna, where if there's tzoya on his hand, it wouldn't be a problem. And Sai, according to Abchista, who holds it's also called tzmoishet tamarna, but if it's nearest and nearest, there wouldn't be a problem of called tzmoishet tamarna. It would be mutter. So why is Papa macher? Zok to Gemara b'mkoima, when something is in its natural habitat, nafesh zuama, it smells even worse. Shaloi b'mkoima, if you have tzoya somewhere else on the hand or on another limb, loy nafesh zuama, it doesn't smell as bad, and that's why the Papa's chiddush is that tzoya b'mkoima is more chomer, and you wouldn't be allowed to say Krishma. And Rashi says, Yadu v'sakizeh b'shada v'chitzim v'psekes. Rashi says, b'mkoima nafesh zuama, shechamahi, it's warmer there where the sun don't shine. Shelo yotza la'avir, it never came in contact with the air. V'loy nispaz reicha, and the aroma did not yet have a chance to dissipate, and therefore it's worse, and therefore Zokra Papa that it's going to be a problem to say Krishma. And that's in fact how we pass, and that's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch. I believe that's in Ayin Vav, I think. I looked it up yesterday. I believe that's in Ayin Vav, or Chaim Sim Ayin Vav, yeah.
I understand that in ancient times they used rocks in order to clean themselves. How clean can they be already using rocks for toilet paper?
That's probably why before they daven they had to go to the mikveh, because just for regular business they use rocks. But before they daven, we needed to have an extra level of cleanliness. And now we understand why we Klal Yisrael often weren't impacted by some of the epidemics and the plagues, because people simply were not clean. They were really not sanitary. But we had to acquire an extra level of cleanliness because we went to the mikveh, we toiled, we washed our bodies before we davened. So it's very practical. Imagine the type of germs that the average person was exposed to.
Well, after the first guy goes to the mikveh, it's not so clean anymore.
They used springs and rivers, so it was washed away. They didn't use a bath for their mikvahs. Yeah, otherwise they would be pretty.
In Yerushalayim, they used mikvahs. There are no springs and rivers.
But how were they fed?
The water wasn't moving. It
couldn't be rainwater because there were Zovim and Zovus there that needed Mayim Chaim. So they had to have Mayim Chaim.
rainwater is a real mixture. Rainwater in a mixture.
Rainwater in the mikveh, you have to be mayim chaim for a zova.
Where does the Nachal Kishin come from?
A lot of them have to.
So these mixtures are women.
Yeah, that came from,
Well, we have rain mikvehs. I'm not sure. There's a certain.
Do you- you're saying there is a constant exchange of water?
I don't. I don't know. I can't be.
You're arguing that it drained and it filled up at the same time. There was a constant movement.
Otherwise, unless you're first in the morning, you don't want to walk. You don't want to go to a mikveh with things floating all around that you don't know where they came from.
That's right. That's
You don't
right.
want, you don't want extraterrestrial from foreign planets floating around in your mikveh.
Right.
I remember when I was a bacher in Amir, before Isville built the beautiful building that they have. It was a very ancient building, and I remember the mikveh was a miraculous mikveh. You were able to go in bald, and you would come out with a full head of hair. It was unbelievable.
This might have something to do with the cholera epidemics. I just want to, put that out
Okay.
there. But I mean, this started off. I mean, the Kohanim had to go. This whole thing started off because the Kohanim have to go in the Beis Hamikdash after every time they go to the bathroom. They have to go to the mikveh. No,
Every Yisrael as well to come into the.
I understand, but the Gemara several blot ago.
It started from the
It started with the Kohanim have to go. So you see that they went every day. They went multiple times a day if they had to go.
And you see, it was cleanliness related because it had to do with going to the bathroom. So it was cleanliness. So the mikvahs must have been clean. Otherwise,
Well, that's the one inside the Beis Hamikdash at least, which was probably, as Duvi pointed out, probably from.
No, that was right outside. It was right outside the base.
Right outside. Didn't it say that inside one of the rooms that there was a stairway down to the mikveh?
Yeah, there were two. We'll more discuss two mikvahs. One was within the confines of the Zohar, which were 4 of the 5 tefillas that the Kohen Gadol used, and then the one was right out of the confines of the Zohar, which he used in the morning when he went to the washroom. The Tanur Rabban. Halacha, the halach is besuda. So this halach is in Hilchas Suda. Adam yoytze lahashin mayim. What if someone gets up during the Suda because he has to use the washroom? That's a relatively common occurrence. So the halach is noitel yodai achas v'nichnas. He only has to wash one hand. So, like I mentioned earlier, there's no chiyuv whatsoever to do netilas yadayim if you're matal meraglayim. So therefore, when it comes to kiddush yadayim veraglayim, we learned at the beginning of the daf, the kohen has to make kiddush yadayim veraglayim on both hands. But now we're not talking about the Beis Hamikdash. We're no longer talking about kiddush yadayim veraglayim. We're speaking about a regular person who goes to the washroom. You only have to wash one hand. So if you see someone coming out of the washroom and he only washes one hand, don't eat in his house. But lemaisa, unless the hand touched something that was a aver mechusa, you only have to wash the hand that you're mishabsh with. That's mamish halacha lemaisa. Of course.
So how did it get to washing one hand to doing nagelwasser from the washroom? All these people washing nagelwasser. What?
What do you mean nagelwasser?
I saw all these people washing nagelwasser 3 times on each hand with the cup.
Same when they come out of the washroom.
Yeah, they're just being machmer, or what are they doing?
I guess they're being machmer. I guess they're being machmer to wash 3 times. I mean, there's probably up to Kabbalah reasons why it's done in Tzemach Yisrael. Okay. But technically, the mandate of the Tanoim is the hand that you touch something dirty with is the hand that has to be washed. Okay. What happens if Diber im Chaveira, what happens if you engaged in a conversation out of the Suda, which means you were Masiach Das in the Suda, the Hiflik means Shah, you spent a considerable amount of time deep in conversation, so you were Masiach Das from the meal, so then Noitel Shteyadav v'nichnas. Then you have to wash 2 hands. Why? The Chivin Shehiflik, Shah Achas v'Shtayim, since you were distracted from the Suda for a significant amount of time, you've been Mesiach Das, and you likely weren't careful during that entire time as to where you put your hands, and hands touch everything. And since hands touch everything, you have to wash both hands. Zog to Gemara, when you do wash your hands, don't wash outside where no one will see you. Because if you come in and you just get right back to your Suda, people are going to think you didn't wash your hands. And they'll be choshed you because they didn't see you washing. So what should you do? Come to your place, and at your place, I guess you have the shamus bring you a shissel and a wash table so you can wash in front of everybody. And even that's not enough. You have to make sure that everybody takes note of the fact that you washed. And Rashi says, you tell the shamish to say, okay, I have some water here for Yankel, but does anybody else want to wash too? So that everyone should realize that Yankel washed. It's the only time we say that people will be chosh that you didn't wash is if when you came back in, it was already the end of the Suda and the meal was no longer being served, but people hang around for an extended period of time after the meal to continue drinking. If it's just for drinking, then people might think that you didn't wash your hands. But if you came back in the middle of the meal, you left after the soup, you came back for the main course, then you could wash outside. Why? No one's going to be choshed you. Everyone's going to know that he's not going to want to come back to eat without washing, so they'll assume he washed. They don't need to witness that. Omar of Nachum Yitzchak and us nowadays, who we're all more careful about these things to stay clean. You don't have to wash in front of everybody. Everybody will assume that you washed. So I'm just wondering, if you're at a chasana and you wash, and then you have the first course, and then the first dance happens, and everybody's running all over the place, and then you come back for the second dance, is there a problem of Hesach Hadas? I don't know. I never saw anybody wash again after the first dance to continue eating. But it's interesting because the Gemara here says that if someone has an extended period of Hesach Hadas, that would mandate that he wash again. Halacha l'maisa. If one does wash again, I'm sorry?
Oh, chasna, it's like part of the Suda. You know what I mean? It's like you expect it. It's like it's, you know.
The whole bunch is Yudai Maskani is saying. So like during a dance, you're not going to scratch your head. You're not going to, people are going to focus on watching what they're touching. I don't know. I've never seen anybody wash again. So I don't know. So Pashas, you're right, Toby. I'm just raising it. I never heard a Shaila asked about it. The other interesting halach is, so if someone does go to the washroom, does he wash? He has to wash, that's obvious, but does he make a bracha al netilas yadayim? So there's actually a Shaila in the poskim whether or not you make an al netilas yadayim. Most poskim hold that if you went out to the bathroom number one, you would wash and you would not make an al netilas yadayim. But if you were a basic raglov, if you had a BM, as they call it, then a lot of shitas hold that you actually do have to make a bracha al netilas yadayim again. And for halacha l'maisa, you'd have to ask your local Orthodox rabbi. But it's a machlokes of the later achronim as to whether one would have to make. He's for sure has to make the netilas yadayim. The shaila is if he makes a bracha.
Rashi says he exits for an hour or two.
That's right. So you mean a 30-minute dance is nishkafelach?
Yeah.
I hear. No, it could very well be. I believe that the Mishabura says that one should make an al netilas yadayim if he went to the bathroom of the toilet in the middle of the suda. Zok the heilige Mishnah weiter. Ein adam nichnas la'azara la'avoda afilu tahar. Even if one knows that they're Torah, they toiveled yesterday, they know they're Torah, one may still not go into the Azara to do avoida achi yitpoil until they toivel again. What does Rashi say? La'avoida, lav dafka. It doesn't dafka mean la'avoida. Merely entering the Azara is mechayiv that you have to make a tefillah. In other nichnas la'azara achi yitpoil, tamim parsh b'gemar. Rashi tells us, even if you're not going to do avodah, merely entering the Zohar would mandate that you have to type. It's going to be nagaya here soon because the Kohen Gadol had to type ben avodah la avodah. So that's why I think it was relevant. So let's see what the Mishnah says back there. Chomesh tefillos, 5 tefillos, v'asara kedushin, toivel Kohen Gadol u'mekadosh by the end. V'chulam b'kodesh. All of these tevilas were in the kodesh, and where were they? Al Beis HaParva, on top of the Beis HaParva. Chutz mizu b'vad, except for the very first tefillah of the day, which is before he came into the Azara. He was not allowed to come into the Azara until he had the tefillah. So that tefillah had to be in a mikveh that was external to the perimeter of the Azara. And in order so that he should have privacy, they held up a linen sheet to act as a block between him and the nation, so no one saw him under it. Let's see Rashi. The Gemara al Beis HaParva al Gag Lishkos Beis HaParva. It was on the roof of the Beis HaParva. Chutz mizu harishayna, except for the first tefillah, she'ene ba chayvel yom kippurim. It wasn't a chiyuv that was specifically for Yom Kippurim. The chol yoma nami isa, every day before entering the Azara, every kohen had to go to Tovel. About tefillas habayis chayvel Yom Kippurim, but the special tefillas that were only on Yom Kippurim, ksiv bahem b'makam kadosh. The Torah says that he has to bracha to b'sar b'may b'makam kadosh. It says binyana the achimois. So you see those special tefillas done had to be within the confines of the Azara. Okay, Dr. Hadl Gemara Vayter. Sha'alu es ben Zayma. They asked ben Zayma, Tefillah zu lama. This tefillah, and Rashi says, which tefillah shall kol shachos. So we're not talking about these special tefillahs in Yom Kippur. The fact that every kohen before he ever enters the Azar must toivel, where do you know it from? Amar lehem, he answered, Umaha mishane mi kodesh lekodesh, umi makim sha'anus koresh, u'lemakim sha'anus koresh. Madich the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur. When he's being mishane from one holy area to another holy area, from the Heichel to the Kodesh Kedoshim, from the Azara to the Kodesh Kedoshim, and in either place, whether he's in the Azara or in the Kodesh Kedoshim, there's the same einish chorus of someone goes into these areas where they're tamei, still ton tefillah. So even when you're going from parallel kedusha to parallel kedusha, the Torah mandates that the kohen gadol should toivel. SoAmishalim Michayla Kodesh, if someone is going from the Harabayis, which we're considering choil, to the Azara, umimakom she'eina nishkaros, umimakom she'anishkaros. And from Harabayis, where if someone's told me he's not chayav koros, into the Azara, where someone is chayav koros, there's a much greater difference in kedusha. Eina din sheton tefillah. Surely it should require tefillah. It's a kal v'chomer. Zokt heilige Rashi. Umam mishalim mikodesh kohen gadol v'chamash avodas b'yom kippurim. During the 5 avodas hamishtamis mechutz l'pneim u'pneim l'chutz, he's going back and forth from the Kodesh HaKadoshim to the outside. Both places are still holy. While Shneim on the Shkarish and Nichlas B'tumah, nevertheless, Ton Tefillah ben Avodah LaAvodah to the Alpha Pirkin. So Zeh Abami Beis LaAzara, a regular kohen who's coming from his home to the Azara, Shul Mechol Kodesh, should surely require Tefillah. That is Ben Zoymis, that sounds like a deraisa. Yehuda Omer, Sirach Tefillah Hizu. Really, it's not accomplishing anything. You don't have to make Tefillah if he's Torah anyway. It's only because if he's going to the mikveh, he starts thinking, hey, am I Torah or am I tummy? And he'll think back to see if maybe he forgot that he actually became tummy. So they should remember. Because what's going to happen is we know that normally when you toivel, you need to wait for Harav Shemesh. So he comes in the morning and he's about to go into the Azara and he goes into the mikveh. And he starts thinking, hey, was I tummy? Hey, yeah, I was tummy. Now I can't even go into the Azara even after I toivel because I have to wait for tonight for Harav Shemesh. So it acted as a reminder for someone coming into the Azara. What halacha l'maisa? What's going to be the difference between Ben Zoyma and Rabbi Yehuda? If it's deraisa, it's going to ruin the avodah. The avodah will be possible. And if it's just to remind you that you might be tamei, it would not be mechel avodah, like the Gemara says. Ben Zoyma machal avodah. According to Ben Zoyma, it's going to pass the avodah because he holds a deraisa, and the deraisa because a kavachem is a deraisa. Rabbi Yehuda just exerted their abundance, loy machal avodah, it would not pass the avodah. In fact, the Gemara, Ben Zoyma mi machal. Does Ben Zoyma actually hold that the avodah will be possible if he didn't toivel? I'm going to prove to you from a brisa that the tevilah at the beginning of the day, whether the kohen omitted that, it would not pass the avodah. But Tanya, we look at the brisa. Kohen gadol shaloi tobal, v'loi kiddush ben beged lebeged u'ben avodah lavodah. The kohen gadol didn't follow the requirements of toiveling as he changed his clothing, or making kiddush yadayim v'raglayim in between his avodas. Avodah his avodah will be kosher. If the whole makor of the tefillah is from the tefillah of the Kohanim, according to Mitzvah, it's a Kal V'chomer. And even the Tefillah of the Kohen is not going to passel. So surely the Tefillah that we learned that you have to do before you come into the Zohar, surely that shouldn't passel the Avodah. And then it says, Echad Kohen Gadol, Echad Kohen Hedjid, Shaloi Kiddush Yadav V'Raglav Shachris V'Avad, if he didn't do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, V'Avad Avodah, Avodah Sepsula. So at the end of the day, you see Tefillah will surely not make the Avodah passel. So what's the halacha l'maisa difference between Ben Zayma who learns it from a Kal V'Chomer and Rabbi Yehuda who just says it's a Gzera? And the whole shaila is if you're going to be over in Yisrael say. Ben Zayma Koi Basei, Rabbi Yehuda Koi Basei. It says in the pasuk, Rashi says V'Rachat es Besari B'Mayim. Actually, Rachas B'Mayim is Besari elevation. So there's a mitzvah to say to go to the mikveh, and it's that I say that you're going to violate. And even though we know in Einshim in a din, you cannot learn out a lot from a din, but from the Gemara you see, and I say you could learn out from a Kal V'Chomer. In fact, does Rabbi Yehuda actually hold that every person who goes into the Azor needs to tovel? Right? We're saying Rabbi Yehuda holds of this, holding it to tovel. His reasoning is to remind someone, if they're abundant, to remind someone of his tummy. But I'll prove to you that Rabbi Yehuda holds he doesn't have to tovel at all when he comes into the Azor. But Tanya we learned Mitzayra. Now the Mitzayra went through a whole Tahira process for a week before he actually came into the Azara to do his final karbonos. And he went to the mikveh already twice before he didn't even get near the Azara. And it says the Mitzayra toivel v'aymid b'ashar nikner. In the morning when he comes, it's called something called the Lishkas HaMitzayroyim, which was just to the right. We learned maybe a week ago. It was just to the right of the front entrance to the Azara, just to the right of Shar Niknar. They had a mikveh there, and he would toivel before he would come to Shar Niknar. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't have to toivel at all. You know why? He had already toiveled last night because at the end of the 7 days, the Mitzvah has to toivel at night. So here you have a fellow who's entering the Azara. He toiveled the night before, and Rabbi Yehuda holds he does not have to toivel again. So you see clearly that Rabbi Yehuda holds that you don't have to toivel when you come into the Azara to remind you that you might be tummy. So Dr. Gemara, you can't ask me a kasha from that brisa, because there Rabbi Yehuda explicitly explains why this case is an exception, why the Mitzvah is an exception. Dafka Mitzvah doesn't have to toivel. He just toiveled, so he has to hire on this. If he had some tumah on him, he would have reminded himself last night. But a regular person coming into the Azara, Avada Rabbi Yehuda would agree, has to toivel. Frank Gemara, that's such an obvious terrace to the kasha. The person who tried to ask the kasha, who tried to challenge Rabbi Yehuda from this brisa quoting Rabbi Yehuda, what was his havamin? Rabbi Yehuda says very clearly here, the reason why he doesn't have to toivel is only because he just toiveled, but another person would have to toivel. So what's the kasha? Dr. Moore, the truth is, it wasn't really a good kasha. The reason why we quoted this brisa is because of a different kasha that this Hamari wanted to ask. Because he wanted to ask a steer on this Rabbi Yehuda from a different Rabbi Yehuda, so he brought it down. And what was the other Rabbi Yehuda where there's a problem from? It says Lishkas HaMitzrayim. The Lishkas HaMitzrayim again was one of the lishkas, one of the chambers in the Ezras Noshim. That was, if you're coming in from east to west, walking into Shar Niknar, it would be to your right. Shesham Mitzrayim Tovim. That's where the Mitzrayim would Tovim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Loi Mitzrayim Bilvad Amru. Not only Mitzrayim Tovim, Ela Kol Adam. So this is a stira. Earlier, the Brash Rabbi Yehuda said, "And we said that applies exclusively to a Mitzrayim, but everybody else would have to toivel. And then here it says, not only Mitzrayim, Ela Kol Adam, meaning Rabbi Yehuda is clearly saying that the Mitzrayim did have to toivel. So there he says the Mitzrayim don't have to toivel. Here he says the Mitzrayim did have to toivel. So do they have to toivel or not? Dr. Moore, loy kasha, how to toivel, how to loy toivel. Where you just said earlier that the Mitzrayim doesn't need tefillah is because he toiveled the night before. This brisa, where he said that the Mitzrayim did toivel, was speaking where he didn't toivel the night before. Frank the Gemara, you can't say that. Either like toivel, if this Mitzrayim didn't toivel the night before, then he can't come into the Azara today because after the tefillah he needs to have Harav Shemesh. And this morning when he's toiveling, he didn't have Harav Shemesh unless he waits till tomorrow. Harav Shemesh boy. So that can't explain. So once again, we have a steer according to Rabbi Yehuda. Does the Mitzvah have to toivel in the morning or not? We have to say that both brises he toiveled. But had asaftaite, had lo asaftaite. Where Rabbi Yehuda says the Mitzrayim do toivel is speaking where he was Mesiach Das he wasn't focused on maintaining his tahira. That's why he asked to toivel again. But if in fact he was focused the whole time, he would not have to toivel again. Frank the Gemara, that doesn't make sense either. Because once a guy loses track and wasn't watching himself, he might even have come into contact with a mace. Rashi says, if he wasn't focused, then he might have a real problem. If someone isn't focused on his tahira, it's possible that he wandered somewhere and he picked up too much mace. So we can't say that's the case. So once again, we have a steer. One Brisa Rabbi Yehuda says the Mitzvah does not have to toivel, and one Brisa says that the Mitzvah does have to toivel. You have to say in both cases the Mitzvah was focused, and he knows his Torah. So why in one Brisa does he have to toivel again? The Brisa that says the Mitzvah does not have to toivel is because when he toiveled the night before, he had in mind that tomorrow I'm going to be going into the Beis HaMikdash, and the tefillah that I'm doing today is the tefillah that's going to allow me entrance into the Beis HaMikdash. However, if you toiveled today, but you only had in mind to just be matar yourself from your Tumas Tzaras, but you didn't have the special elevated kavanah that I'm toiveling in order to go into the Azara, even though it's the same water and the same tefillah, nevertheless, the tefillah does not allow you to enter the Azara. So the Brisa where people says you don't have to toivel is speaking where when he toiveled the night before, he had in mind that he's going to go. He had in mind that he's going to be going to the Beis HaMikdash tomorrow. And the Brisa which says that he has to toivel again is where when he toivels, he didn't think of going into the Beis HaMikdash the next day. Or you could make it much simpler. You could just change the wording of what Rabbi Yehuda said, and you could change it. Loy mitzarayim ala kol adam. So our girsa was loy mitzarayim bilvad. Loy mitzarayim bilvad amru. The mikveh isn't only for mitzrayim; it's also for kol adam. If you change it and say loy mitzarayim, the mikveh was not for mitzrayim at all. Ela kol adam was only made for others because in fact the mitzrayim, according to Rabbi Yehuda, does not have to toivel because according to Rabbi Yehuda, the mitzrayim toivel the night before. Rabbi Yehuda l'deveim derabban karmelu. Here's a third pshat. Rabbi Yehuda Avada holds the mitzvah doesn't have to toivel, but Rabbi Yehuda is making his comment according to Rabbanan. L'didi mitzvah ain't tzarich tefillah. According to me, the mitzvah doesn't need tefillah at all because he already toiveled the night before. But l'detchul holds that the mitzvah does need tefillah. Ideally, easy mias at least agree to me as well. The loy mitzvah and b'vadamu el kol adam. Once you're saying that the mitzvah needs tefillah, there shouldn't be any reason to distinguish between the mitzvah and anybody else. Everybody else should have to be toivel as well. Rabbanan, the Rabbanan says no. Mitzvah daish betuma. Only a mitzvah do require him to make an extra tefillah in the morning. Why? Because he's so very deep in tumah. He was so tumah for the past while because he was a mitzvah outside. Oisa tumah hurgul ad akshav liga tumah. He was very used to not being worried about tumah because he's very tumah for a long time. So we require an extra tefillah of him to make sure that he's aware. But kol adam, a regular person who was not a mitzvah, l'dai shebetumah, and therefore we don't require that extra awareness to go to the mikveh in the morning to remind him if he had any tumah. Amal abai Rabbi Yosy. Name a rabbanon the pligi alei the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zayma. We had a machlokes between the rabbanon and the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zayma whether or not ben Zayma held with a deraisa, right? So let's say the rabbanon who argue on Rabbi Yehuda. I'm sorry, I got me very mixed up here. Lemer rabbanon the pligi Allah the Rabbi Yochanan, the Rabbi Yehuda, the rabbanon that we discussed here, who argues on Rabbi Yehuda and says that the mitzvah does have to toivel. Let's say he holds like Ben Zayma, Ben Zayma holds from a kal v'chomer that everybody who comes into the Azara has to toivel. So let's say we had a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbanon whether or not a mitzvah has to toivel the morning that he comes into the Beis HaMikdash. Let's say that he holds like Ben Zayma, who holds that everybody always has to toivel when they come into the Azara because of the kal v'chomer. Well, so you might ask, why would you put the two together? The Zayma holds everybody who comes into the Azara has to toivel because of his kal v'chomer. Yet the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda are only discussing the mitzvah. So how could you put the two together? Zok the Gemara. Really, the Rabbanan who argue in Rabbi Yehuda and who hold that the mitzvah has to toivel holds everybody has to toivel. So why are they arguing related to a mitzvah? The reason why the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan was quoted discussing whether or not a Mitzvah has a toivel, even though in fact Rabbanan hold everybody has a toivel, is like the Acha Koiched Rabbi Yehuda, just to amplify Rabbi Yehuda Shita, who holds not only does nobody have to toivel, even a Mitzvah doesn't have to toivel. Maybe that's shot in the Rabbanan, and maybe the Rabbanan hold that everybody has to toivel. Oidoma shiny Mitzvah to Daish Betuma, or maybe the Rabbanan hold normally you don't have to toivel. And the only reason why a Mitzvah has a toivel is because he's been so used to being involved in Tumah for the past couple of weeks. Amarlei, so Rabbi Yosef responded to Abaye and said, "Shiny mitzvah to dash b'tumah." The machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan, whether or not a mitzvah needs tefillah the morning of, is a machlokes only by a mitzvah. But nobody would agree to Ben Zoyma that there's a chiyuv for every person to toivel because of a kavul chomer before they came into the Azor. Okay, I guess we could stop over here. Shkoyach.
Yeah.
Take a shower before you go into the mikveh so that you could be makayim both of the chiyuvim of the mikveh, side the chiyuv of cleanliness and side the chiyuv of kedusha. And there are, I think the Abdinazer speaks out that since our tefillas today are parallel to the avodas that were done in the Beis Hamikdash, therefore that's why there's a need to go to the mikveh before we daven, because it's all parallel to in the Beis Hamikdash. Before you came to do the avodah, you have to go to the